Hi, my name is CCrema, and today I'm going to be presenting dress and visual representation during the Age of Revolution. For my topic, I've chosen to focus on the artwork of Jacques Louis David and his use of drape in his work and how it was used to persuade the French public that Napoleon was the right new leader for France. The French Revolution was a period of social and political upheaval that was a turning point in European history and had a lasting impact on the world that began in 1789 and ended in the late 1790s with the ascent of Napoleon Bonaparte. The French Revolution helped to shape modern democracies by demonstrating the power of the people. It also led to the fall of the monarchy, the rise of the middle class, and the growth of nationalism. For the purpose of this assignment, I will be discussing the way the depiction of drape influenced French politics through the works of the neoclassical painter Jacques Louis David. Drapery adds force to a composition through color and movement, indicating in a clear way the emotional tenor of a piece. Many 19th century artworks clearly use drapery to also emphasize the moral element in art. I believe that in this context, the use of this dramatic special effect was intended to influence the feeling among the general public of France that Napoleon was similar to the great historical figures of ancient Greece and Rome. As we view examples and images of the evolution of this effect, I will attempt to explain how David's use of drape on Napoleon was the accumulation of centuries of conveying that the mind, knowledge, and strategy was needed to rule, not riches and royalty. Born on August 15, 1769, in Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte rose from humble beginnings to become the Emperor of the French Republic and a dominant player on the European stage. Napoleon was born into a family of Italian descent. His father was a lawyer and political figure, while his mother instilled him in a strong work ethic and ambition. At just 9 years old, he was sent to mainland France for education, where he excelled in military studies, setting the stage for his future. His military career began amid the chaos of the French Revolution. By demonstrating extraordinary tactical skills, he caught the eye of revolutionary leaders. His ascent in the military was rapid, showcasing his talent as a strategist and leader. In 1799, disillusioned with the instability of the revolutionary government, Napoleon staged a coup d'etat, overthrowing the Directory. He established the consulate and became the first consul, consolidating power and paving the way for his future as emperor. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself emperor, symbolizing a shift from revolutionary ideals to autocratic rule. He implemented the Napoleonic Code, which modernized France's legal system, emphasizing equality and mediocrity, a lasting legacy in legal frameworks around the world. Napoleon's downfall began with his ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. The harsh winters and fierce resistance decimated his army. By 1814, facing defeat, he abdicated and was exiled to Elba, though he would later make a brief return to power. In 1815, Napoleon escaped Elba and returned to France for a period known as the 100 Days. However, his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo led to his exile in St. Helena, where he would spend the remainder of his life. Napoleon's impact on Europe was profound. He spread revolutionary ideas, reformed legal systems, and changed the political landscape. While controversial, his legacy endures in modern governance and military strategy. In conclusion, Napoleon Bonaparte remains a complex figure, a brilliant military leader, reformer, and a symbol of ambition and power. Jacques Louis David is one of the most influential artists of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Known for his role in the neoclassical movement, David's art not only reflects the aesthetic values of his time, but also the political and social changes that shaped France. In the early stages of his career, David was influenced by the Baroque style, but soon gravitated towards neoclassicism. His visit to Italy in the 1770s had a profound impact on him, allowing him to study the works of classical masters. This trip inspired his commitment to classical themes and the emphasis on clarity and order in art. David's breakthrough came with his painting Oath of the Horatii in 1784, which exemplified the neoclassical style. This work, depicting the heroic sacrifice of three brothers, reflects themes of patriotism and duty, resonating deeply with the revolutionary spirit of the time. David was the first French artist to unite classical subjects with a linear precision and minimalist composition. completely rejecting the decorative and painterly effects of the Rococo. His canvases created powerful, didactic works of moral clarity with few distractions or pictorial flourishes. David's paintings answered the demand for art that directly conveyed civic virtues to a wide audience. As the French Revolution unfolded, David became increasingly involved in politics. He was a fervent supporter of the revolution, using his art to promote revolutionary ideals. His famous painting, The Death of Socrates, captures the essence of moral conviction and sacrifice, aligning with the revolutionary ethos. After the revolution, David became the official painter for Napoleon Bonaparte. He produced several grand works during this period, including Napoleon crossing the Alps, which I will discuss later. This painting not only immortalized Napoleon's image, but also emphasized his strength and leadership. David's later years were marked by political upheaval. After Napoleon's fall, he was exiled to Brussels, where he continued to paint until his death. His work laid the foundation for neoclassical style, influencing generations of artists. David's emphasis on historical subjects and moral themes set a precedent for the Romantic movement that also followed. In conclusion, Jacques Louis David was more than just a painter. He was a pivotal figure in the intersection of art and politics during a time of great revolution. Now I'd like to focus on a few specific pieces of David's. The first one I will discuss is the crossing of St. Bernard Pass, painted in January of 1801, 3 years before Napoleon declared himself as emperor. An image of absolute control, confidence, and optimism, Bonaparte crossing the St. Bernard Pass is a large-scale portrait of the emperor. Shown heroically conquering this rough terrain, Napoleon secures his place in history alongside two other generals who found victories in the same difficult military approach. Their names are inscribed on the rocks in the lower left corner, Hannibal and Charlemagne. By adding this detail, David is referencing other great successful men to compare him to. Napoleon had come to power through a military coup in 1799, declaring himself first consul and seizing command. This painting represents this bold general and his ability to maintain control in the face of chaos and danger. Although the horse rears up on the edge of a rocky cliff, Napoleon calmly holds the reins in one hand while gesturing forward with his other arm. The movement of the horse is echoed in the flowing golden cape of Bonaparte. Everything about the action suggests a forward trajectory, highlighting Napoleon's ability to lead France above the turmoil of the revolutionary period. While David had supported the revolution, he committed himself to the new French leader Bonaparte, who had restored David's reputation and financial success as well, and painted many portraits of the general that helped legitimize his claim to authority. Another painting of his is called The Death of Marat. David was commissioned to create a memorial to Jean-Paul Marat following his assassination in 1793. He was a French politician, physician, journalist, and a leader of a faction. Marat was murdered while sitting in a medicinal bath that alleviated the symptoms of a painful skin condition. David's painting combines such factual information, including a legible version of a deceptive plea, calculated to gain an audience with Marat, along with highly symbolic elements of propaganda to create an image that elevates the death of Marat to the death of a martyr. Sometimes referred to as Marat breathing his last, we see the humble workspace of a tireless public servant, only his bath and a simple box that serves as his writing desk. This sparse composition forces the viewer to contemplate the body of Marat, which appears peacefully splayed. The knife wound, visible on his chest, is barely indicated, and only glimpses of the bloody bathwater hint at the preceding violence. Although the revolutionary government had outlawed religion, David created a visual analogy between Marat and images of the dead Christ. The graceful sweep of Marat's arm mirrors Michelangelo's Pieta and other scenes in the deposition from the cross. The white turban wrapped around Marat's head serves as a proxy for a halo. From this example, we can clearly see how powerful David's talent was to persuade viewers, especially during a time where depictions and portraits like these were a crucial form of entertainment and communication. The third piece of David's that I will discuss is called the Tennis Court Oath. Painted between 1790 and 1794, it is an incomplete painting showing the titular tennis court oath at Versailles. It was one of the foundational events of the French Revolution. This rich sketch by David is one of the most famous works from the French Revolutionary era. The thrust of the bodies together and toward the center symbolizes a stand for unity. The spectators, including the children at the top right, and the curtains even, are all joining in the scene. The tennis court oath presents us with a chaotic feeling. In this unfinished painting, there are hundreds of people clustered together in an unorganized wildness, yet there is no physical violence in the painting. Although there is a sense of chaos from the sheer volume of people crammed into the tennis court, there is also a sense of communion. Communion in the sense that all the people in the painting are together and regard each other as allies. With the amount of people crammed into the back of the sketch, there is the impression that the people in the back have all morphed into a single element, symbolizing unity again. I believe that the curtains work as a symbol of the winds of change after this monumental moment of French history. The tennis court oath was a vote of solidarity among the members of France's Third Estate, one of the three estates that were the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners, uniting these three classes. We can see that through these works, David used his talent to persuade thoughts onto the viewers, which were the French society, through subtlety, detail, and realism. By adopting the attractive Greco-Roman style, David blended these antique subjects with Enlightenment philosophy to create moral examples for the French public. His realistic forms illustrated narratives that often mirrored contemporary politics, and I believe were done with the intent to persuade, as propaganda. Now I'd like to dive deeper into how David used drape in the depicted clothes and garments to associate Napoleon to the importance of knowledge through antique Greek and Roman ideologies. I'd like to focus back on the crossing of St. Bernard Pass, specifically how the drape of the fabric of his cape that Napoleon wears references the importance and power of knowledge. For example, how other leaders would be depicted in armor, demonstrating that their ruling priorities and ideologies were directed towards protection, defense, and perhaps violence, rather than being strategic, thoughtful, and pensive. This was a new mindset of the post-revolution, and the French people wanted a new way of ruling. In all of his paintings, the way David depicts clothing is consistent. As we've seen in the previous examples, the way he uses the drape of clothes creates a flawless image of the wearer. The drape looks light, angelic-like, and hyper-realistic, usually flowing off of the body or in movement. In the crossing of the St. Bernard Pass, the movement and direction of the drape acts as a focal point to give the impression that Napoleon is moving forwards, both literally and in his political career, more so than his pointed hand does. His golden cape creates such a strong pull towards this piece that it acts as its own character. It is another component of the painting that is separate from the actual person in the piece, but cohesively works to emphasize and reassure the emotion that the human in the painting is conveying. Emotions that a human face cannot explicitly convey, or that would be too obvious or conspicuously persuading, which was exactly the opposite of what David wanted to portray, much like how the previous royal regime was depicted, too over-the-top in embellishments and untruthful. This contrast of Rococo to neoclassicism was a refreshing new form for the French public to get a clearer and more simple impression of what Napoleon could do for them and France, which in this piece would be to bring them onward with him. If Napoleon's face was very stern and David's special effect of drape wasn't done this way, it might have been too obvious to the French public that he's trying to implement the idea of power or authority. The neoclassical style of his portrait also could have helped persuade the French public that his new regime was honest, with no frills, kind of blunt and to the point. This honesty and explicit depiction could have given the impression to the public that Napoleon was transparent about what kind of a leader he wanted to be for France. His clothes are simple, not covered in millions of embellishments, and possibly weren't greatly expensive, but were still those of a higher ranking and authority. By being depicted in this way, Napoleon was perceived as different from the royal regime. This image of himself would have helped ensure that his idea of being in power wasn't to spend France's money on all of himself, for him to look good, but to keep a more simple way of dressing, reflecting back on his ideologies of the power of knowledge. This display conveys him as a more humble leader than being covered in expensive jewels wasn't a priority to him, but that France was. Napoleon was also often dressed in patriotic colors in his portraits, showing loyalty and dedication to his country. Jacques Louis David designed the new flag of France, which embodied the principles of the Revolution. liberty, equality, and fraternity, which is another reason why Napoleon was most likely dressed in red, white, and blue clothes in most of his portraits. David perfectly encapsulates what the French people wanted as a leader, someone who prioritized the prosperity and economic growth of France rather than to gain power for their own personal gain. I've chosen to include a picture depicting Pericles and Julius Caesar to relate back to the depiction of Napoleon in the crossing of the St. Bernard Pass. Pericles was a prominent Greek statesman, ordinator, and general during the Golden Age of Athens. The period in which he led Athens, in fact, has been called the Age of Pericles due to his influence, not only in his city's fortunes, but on the whole of Greek history during the 5th century BCE and even after his death. Pericles sought for the expansion and stabilization of all democratic institutions. He enacted legislation granting the lower classes access to the political system and the public offices from which they had previously been barred. Though Napoleon and Pericles do not have that much in relation to how they ruled, their values were similar. I wanted to use Pericles and his depiction as an example as to how David may have taken inspiration from specifically the robes that this leader wore and put it into his own art. Although they were worn due to the hot climate and possibly didn't have much symbolism to the ancient Greeks, David references the realism from these marble or bronze statues in his own artwork to not only encapsulate the assurance of a great leader, but that Pericles and Napoleon had similar ideologies to how they wanted to rule for their people and be portrayed, clear, concise, and honest. Much like Pericles, Julius Caesar was depicted in a similar manner. Napoleon greatly resonated with Caesar as an emperor and took a lot of inspiration from his achievements. Philosophy, political thought, and classic arts, such as painting, sculpture, etc., were all held in high esteem in both of these Greek and Roman civilizations. Caesar and Pericles wanted their societies to be the best in the world and to be great leaders for them. They promoted the importance of knowledge to develop their societies and believed that to be powerful would be to be intellectually superior. In Napoleon's new reign over France, he established himself as someone who would bring new ideals and help France regain its strength after the Revolution. Through David's portraits of Napoleon, we can see that he is referencing the backbone of Napoleon's beliefs, that knowledge was power rather than just force or wealth, much like the Greek and Roman civilizations that prospered on for centuries before him. Napoleon wanted to do the same for France. David connects the dots between ancient Greece and Rome to Napoleon through his neoclassical art style. David is essentially dressing Napoleon with the regal robes of the great generals of the classical past. I believe that he intended that as the public viewed his portraits and paintings, they subconsciously created an understanding that Napoleon was born to lead the French Republic, that he was meant to be part of history. Thank you.